think about who you want at your deathbed, and then do the work now of nurturing those relationships. And then really make sure you're investing now so that your dying will be better, but your living will also be better.
Hello, and welcome to Working with me, Dan Doriani, hosting a podcast where we explore faith, work, culture, and the way believers can make a difference in their corner of the world. Hey, everybody, welcome to another podcast. And today I'm delighted to have Lydia Dugdale, Dr. Lydia Dugdale, who not only is an MD, but also has theological training in the field of ethics, which led her to start something that sounds pretty awesome, the Yale program, one of our finest universities, for medicine, spirituality, and religion. You founded it, you directed it for a while. Now you are in Columbia. You're still a practicing physician. You speak widely. You've written a wonderful book that I really like called The Art of Dying. And as we were saying before we got started, people used to write books about that all the time. And now, if you talk about art of dying, people think, is this like how to commit suicide well? What is wrong with you? Yep. Have I introduced you well? And what led you to write this marvelous book on this very old topic, the art of dying?
Well, let me say first, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that I co-founded and co-directed the Yale program for medicine, spirituality, and religion with my good friend, the good doctor, Reverend Dr. Benjamin Doolittle. So I don't want to take all the credit there.
Okay, you want to make sure people don't think Doolittle did little.
Doolittle does a lot.
He's do a lot. Okay.
He does a lot. And in fact, it was very much a partnership. And when I left Yale in 2019, he has continued to steer that ship. So
excellent.
It's a wonderful program.
Credit where credit's due.
That's right. That's right. So my book, The Lost Art of Dying, I finished writing in 2019, and it was released in the middle of the pandemic in 2020. And it's a book that really riffs on the bubonic plague of the mid-1300s and how that, in a sense, was an impetus for people to begin thinking about their mortality and preparing for death. And really the central theme is that if you want to die well, you have to live well. And living well takes a certain amount of intentionality. You don't just live well without being reflective about how you're living. You really need to look forward, to sort of face up to how you are living, and then to adjust course along the way so that you live well in order to die well. So
just so everybody understands, bubonic plague took people's lives sometimes within 24 hours or less, very commonly within a week.
Yes.
So you had to be ready to die at any moment.
That's correct.
And then, I know you know this, but you can comment on it. So this is for our listeners who may not know that the bubonic plague took people away within 24 to 168 hours. But it's also true that the literature is for children too, and for families, because so many children did not reach the age of 10. And so that literature,
Yes.
Tell us about the literature, great opening point. To die well, you have to live well, but...
Yeah, so the genre of literature that developed during the aftermath of the bubonic plague of the mid-1300s really started coming on the scene in the early 1400s. And of course, then with the rise of the printing press, it took off. So this was a genre that initially was tied to the Western Church. Early 1400s is pre-Catholic and Protestant. We just have the Western Church. So the author of the earliest version is anonymous, but we think based on the kind of writing and knowing what we know about some of the leadership of the Western Church at the time, that it was likely tied to the church. Of course, with the Protestant Reformation, there are Protestant versions. By the 1800s, there are Jewish versions. There are even straight up secular versions altogether. So the former president of Harvard University, Drew Faust, who's written a really beautiful book on the Civil War, on death and the Civil War, called This Republic of Suffering, she talks about how at the time of the Civil War in America, 1860s, whether you were from the North or from the South, whether you were religious or not, the idea that you would attend to the preparation for death as a part of your living was just part of being brought up
universal.
Well. Yeah. You learn your table manners, you learn the art of conversation, the art of courtship, from another era. you would also learn about the art of dying. And so this became a very, very popular genre of literature. It was all over the West in many different languages, many different iterations for more than 500 years. Really fell out of favor about 100 years ago.
Yeah, it's alien to our consciousness today. So I'm trying to decide. I have so many questions for you. I'm trying to decide what I want to ask you next. I think I want to start with why is it so alien to us today to consider that we should prepare? And part of it has to do with the medicalization of death, which is a theme that goes throughout your book. And you don't use this phrase, but the hospitalization of death as well. People generally die in a hospital now. You're not against that, absolutely, but you think it's better generally to die at home, if possible, with people around you, your family, your friends around you, and so forth. Dig into the medicalization of death, hospitalization of death, and how that contributes to our neglect and our general denial of death or ignoring death. You can describe it whichever way you like.
Yeah, most people die in institutions, not necessarily hospitals. Okay. So institutions would include hospitals, nursing homes, and hospices, inpatient. So we have about 60% of Americans dying in a facility. Okay. About 40% dying at home. Actually, I take that back. It's about 32% dying at home, and then there's about 8% we're not sure about.
But there's also hospice at home that gets
correct. But yes,
involved.
I think hospice at home would still fall under the home deaths as opposed to an institutional hospice death. Yep. Anyway, so why is it that we've lost this art of dying? Yes. If you think about just the last 100 years in medical history, we have the discovery of antibiotics in the 1920s. I often, when I'm speaking to rooms full of people about the bubonic plague, I ask them, I show them photographs of the plague, and I say, clearly these photographs are not from the 1300s.
Correct.
So we still see plague today.
Right.
And then I ask them, do they know where it is? And usually it pops up every so often in sub-Saharan Africa. And then I ask them, do you know how we treat it? And the interesting thing is that bubonic plague is treated with azithromycin or a Z-Pak, which most people have heard of.
Yes.
5 days of antibiotics, and you go from mortality that is almost 100% if exposed to life. It's extraordinary how antibiotics have changed the course of human history. So we have antibiotics in the 20s. By the 1940s, those are widespread. In the 40s, we also see the rise of chemotherapy. By the 50s and 60s, we have early experimentation with organ transplantation and the mechanical ventilator. So everybody now is familiar with the mechanical ventilator because of COVID. Are there enough vents? Is there a breathing machine? All of that language, those really became ubiquitous in the 60s and 70s. So 50s, the preceding the vent was the iron lung. Some of your listeners may have seen photographs of those, which are quite extraordinary. But now with the mechanical ventilator, even mobile ventilators, you can get ventilators and go home with them. It's changed respiratory disease and made it possible to live quite a long time, even with terrible, terrible lung disease. By the 1970s, we have combination chemotherapies, and you can see that really anyone born after World War II has lived in an era where the idea is that disease does not need to kill you, that if you just wait long enough, a cure is around the corner.
Before you die.
That's right. And now there's some new data out on pancreatic cancer, which is extraordinary.
Which was a death sentence 20 years ago.
Well, which is a death sentence still. That's how Tim Keller died, right?
Well, although some people have survived, it's going up, but you're going to tell me more about that.
Well, and Ben Sass, right, has been very public about his illness. This is a terrible cancer, and whenever doctors hear pancreatic cancer, we all, oh shoot, it's we're all bothered by it. But there are new treatments out, and it seems like it is pushing the envelope of mortality, and it might not be as bad as it has been traditionally thought. So anyway, my point is that post-World War II, growing up, we have come to think that death is more or less optional. If we just live long
a problem
enough,
that can be solved if you apply the right techniques.
That's right. Just wait a little bit longer. And so you get into so there's the medical piece. Why else has it been that this art of dying tradition would go away? Well, interestingly, the time in history where it really fell out of favor comes on the heels of World War I, 4 years of global loss of life.
Pointless loss of life.
Pointless loss of life and extraordinary loss of civilians. So World War I was not just combatant deaths. And even before World War I is over, you have the outbreak of the influenza pandemic of 1918, but actually epidemiologists think it's 1918 to 1920. So 4 major waves.
Which carried away, I know you know this, but carried away millions of people, including young adults in great numbers.
Oh, yeah. It was indiscriminate.
It wasn't the infirm and the aged,
That's right,
as with other flu epidemics.
Or in contrast to COVID.
And the death rate was just vastly higher.
That's correct.
Than others.
So you have 6 years of sustained global death in the late teens and up to 1920. You get to the other side of that. And if you just think about how all of us felt during COVID, I remember we were trying to plan a vacation, canceled it, rebooked it, canceled it. That went on 4 or 5 times. And then finally, I'm not going to travel. We'll just stay home and keep doing the same thing again and again. If you think how we all felt on the other side of COVID. I'm so sick of death. I'm so sick of this virus. I'm so sick of my life being interrupted. And in the United States, at least, you get to the 1920s, which was a time of immense economic prosperity. Right. Plus, you have significant social transition. So women get the right to vote. Right. This is the 20s. They cut their hair. They shorten their skirts, the flappers, right? There's jazz music, motion pictures, the rise of the automobile.
So why think about these sad things?
Why think about death? Why think about death when you can get on with living?
Everything is so wonderful. We're so tired of the 1914, 1920.
That's correct.
And it hasn't recovered. And you're helping us, if I may.
Yeah,
you're
sure.
helping us.
Trying.
You're helping us recover the need to contemplate our mortality.
That's right. Yeah.
So you still tell a story early on about Mr. Turner and how you saved his life, quote unquote, twice.
Yeah.
And regret it. I mean, my goodness, surely it's awesome to say, we restarted his heart. Why is it tragic? And why is it tragic in general? You go onward from there, not just his case. But why is it tragic to put forth extraordinary effort when someone needs to face the fact that their body's worn out?
Yeah. So, look, there are all of our body parts have shelf lives. And the heart disease is still the #1 killer of Americans. And when someone has a fatal heart attack, that is a demonstration that the heart, if elderly, is giving out. If young, it might be because of a large cholesterol deposit basically getting lodged in a major blood vessel.
Or a genetic issue.
Or a genetic issue, less commonly. But I think the sort of classic, whopping heart attack in a 40-year-old who's not been taking good care of himself, for example, would be something that with good therapy, et cetera, the heart will bounce back. It's a young heart. When you have a patient who's in his 80s or 90s, the odds of that heart being resilient are very low. You add to that multiple other illnesses, such as, in the case of the patient I described, Mr. Turner, not his real name, of course, he had widely metastatic cancer that had come back after being previously adequately treated 20 years earlier. So a man just riddled with cancer that was incurable, is already very elderly, and his heart stops. That's a man who, even if we can get his heart technically beating again, which we did twice, third time we were unsuccessful, we knew for sure that it would stop again pretty quickly.
Within a day or two.
Oh, probably within hours, which is what happened the 3 times his heart stopped. It was stopped. We got it back for 90 to 120 minutes. He stopped. And by stopping, he's dead, right? A stopped heart is a dead body. And then we resuscitated him. And second time, and then we were unable to resuscitate him the third time. So that's...
And this was at his family's request?
At his family's request. And I will note that his family was deeply Christian. And there's a study done by some of my colleagues at Harvard that shows that people who describe themselves as highly supported by their religious communities, which in the Harvard study happened to be Christians largely, were more likely to die in the intensive care unit, insist on life support, and refuse the services of hospice and palliative care. So the short is highly Christian people tend to want technology, even though highly Christian people
believe that when they die, they're going to meet the Lord.
That's right.
Your book hypothesizes, at least, that the reason is that we're hopeful that God may answer our prayers and that God is good and God works through physicians, which of course he does. So I want to make something very, very clear. You regret that you were called upon to do something that caused him great pain and didn't do any good for him in the long run. You're not against medicine. You're a medical doctor. I just came from medical treatment for an acute problem in my knee. I tore my meniscus. It's nice to say, acute sounds terrible, but that actually is good, right? It means not chronic. And so you're in favor of acute treatment. You're in favor of...
I'm in favor of chronic treatment if it's appropriate.
Right. But you're not against...
No, I'm not against treatment. I'm not against... I am a gainfully employed medical doctor at a very large healthcare system in New York City. Yes.
And so
I believe in medicine.
But what we're talking about here is not refusing treatment. We're talking about refusal to face the fact that our life is finite and that we want to die well. And your book describes some of the things that include dying well. They include surrounded by family and friends, if possible.
If possible.
Low pain, if possible.
And let's just go back to dying in community. So,
I was going to let you comment on any of them.
I'm going to comment on that one right
great.
now. So there's a distinction we need to make between friends and family being present as someone is dying, but maybe going home for the night, and then that person gives up the proverbial ghost, right?
Yes.
That is not a lonely death.
Right.
That is a person, and we see this all the time. People who don't want to be a burden in life often wait until everybody goes home, and then they allow themselves to die. People, it's so interesting. We have patients, hold on. Their granddaughter arrives. They have that final conversation with their granddaughter, and then they die. And so people there's this almost will, and I don't mean it in like I'm seeking death kind of will, but there's a way in which people kind of know when the time is right. And I only mention that because I did have a gentleman come up to me once and he said, I'm so glad I read your book because I have been guilty for the last, I don't know how many years, 20 years, that my father died a lonely death. And the scenario was exactly this. I was with him in the hospital. I went home and he died alone in the middle of the night. And I have been just racked with guilt all these years because he died alone.
And you said...
This is not a lonely death. No.
There's a difference between dying alone and dying lonely.
Correct.
Right. So you can die alone, and many people want to die alone, I hear you say. That is to say nobody else in the room. But that doesn't mean you're lonely.
That's right.
People don't have to be holding your hand at the moment for you to have died in community.
Correct. And also the other thing is community. What is community? And I've had many people say to me, look, I'm an introvert, or I don't have brothers and sisters. My family's all gone. These kinds of scenarios. And what I tend to tell people is, look, you think about who you want at your deathbed, and then do the work now of nurturing those relationships. You don't need 20 people there, 1 or 2. But who are those 1 or 2 that you want to know no matter what will be there? And then really make sure you're investing now so that your dying will be better, but your living will also be better.
Right. So that means, the personal use I made of your book is to say, okay, let me make sure that I have all those good conversations I need to have with people generically, carefully over the years, including my grandchildren who live nearby. We love each other very deeply. But to be able to say, look, we're doing this. We may not be able to do this game forever at some point. One of these days, I'll be unable to still play ball with you. And one of these days I'm going to leave, and let's make sure we remember this and enjoy this. That's part of it.
That is.
It's also part of it to keep on nurturing friendships as we get older, because as we all know, the opportunities for friendship are at our peak in high school and college and early adult years. Everybody's there, and it kind of winnows, especially if you live to be 90. You got to keep those relationships strong. That's a theme that you advocate strongly in the book.
Yes. Yeah.
That's not a
Relationship is
question.
so
Just
important.
to riff on it if you
Yeah,
want.
no. So, I mean, look, human beings are by definition relational creatures. There are all these studies that show that people who suffer from social isolation or loneliness, not only do they have much higher rates of all kinds of diseases, diabetes, high blood pressure, stroke, heart disease, they also have much higher rates of mortality.
Mm-hmm.
People die from loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
Side note, Canada, which is sort of notorious right now for its use of medical aid in dying, medical assistance in dying is actually what the acronym stands for in Canada.
MAID laws, they call MAID.
Yes. In 2024, there were something like 3,400 people in Canada who elected to be euthanized, to be put down, as it were. And one of the reasons they gave was loneliness. So loneliness does drive mortality. It drives death. So if we don't thrive in social isolation and we do flourish when we're in relationship, then we need to be nurturing relationship. And it's not just for the end of life. It's for all of life. And that's where this idea of living well is so tied to dying well.
Which is why we want to be with our church friends or our garden club friends or our tennis friends or whatever, car repair friends. It doesn't matter. I read a study once that said that it's actually better for you to smoke 2 packs of cigarettes a day and have friends than to not smoke and have no friends.
No friends.
I don't know. We're not advocating smoke 2 packs a day.
I'm not advocating smoking.
It's just an interesting study to make your point. You also talk about a masterful and master metaphor, which is the conveyor belt.
Oh, yes.
Yes. So the conveyor belt, and we're not against the conveyor belt either. I said, I tore my meniscus. I get in a system, give your name, go see a doctor, get the treatment, get a plan, and then get your plan for recovery. We're not against conveyor belts. But sometimes you say we have to slow down and find a way to hop off the conveyor belt, slow medicine.
Yes.
Dr. Dugdale, what does that mean?
Yeah, the conveyor belt is really tricky to know when it's going too fast and when you should hop off.
What is the conveyor belt?
So the conveyor belt is this idea that you go into the hospital for one thing and something else happens. And maybe it's a side effect to what happened, or maybe it's foreseen, but you hope it won't happen. Like you go in for surgery and now you have an infection. And then the infection leads to delirium. You're not thinking straight. And then in the middle of the night, you're in the hospital, you're delirious, and you try to get out of bed and you fall. And now you've got not only the reason you went in for surgery, but you've got the hip fracture. And then hip fracture mortality is really high. Right. It's this kind of thing. And we see this all the time.
So there's a good conveyor belt. So if I break my arm, I go into the ER, or if I did it during sports, I can go to the sports clinic, which is better. And they say, oh, we're going to take you in. Good, that's step 1. We're going to get an x-ray, step 2. We're going to splint, step 3. And then after a few weeks, we'll take it off and help you re-strengthen your arm. That's the good conveyor belt, right? But there's a bad conveyor belt. That's what you're describing.
Yeah, although I guess what I would distinguish
You're going to describe it a different way.
Yeah, I mean, the good conveyor belt, usually that's just a well-working machine for a one-and-done type of issue. And I think the conveyor belt that I am concerned about is the sort of no end in sight, frail, elderly patient who has one thing after the next. I mean, for example, if a child goes in for a major surgery, everybody is going to root that child to the finish line, no matter how many bad things happen that were foreseen but you hoped wouldn't happen. But when it's a frail elder, and it's one thing after the next, after the next, after the next, and they've already lived a long life, and they might not even have the cognitive capacity to engage the world.
Make a good decision.
And I'm not saying that those lives are less valuable. Please hear that. I'm not saying that. But I am saying that sometimes the goods of medicine are pushed too far, and physical bodies, like we don't accept the natural end of life. And I think that's what I want to make space for. I'm not advocating for hastening death in an unnatural way, but why are we dragging out the dying process in an artificial way?
Like you say somewhere in the book, you talk about, these aren't your exact words, but we got chemotherapy 1. The best hope is this. It doesn't work. We have chemotherapy 2, best hope after number 1, also didn't work. Now we've got heart failure. Now we've got a lung issue. We got diabetes. Do we really want to try the 3rd most likely form of chemotherapy?
That's right, yeah.
But some people press and press because they're not willing to face their mortality. So let me ask you to do something. I'll give it to you 2 ways. One is address our friends, our listeners, who themselves are a little bit older, maybe have a serious disease, or they have a loved one, maybe their parents or grandparents or aunt and uncle, whatever it might be. What would you like to say to them about aging? If you could change your corner of the world, which is medicine, which is largely taken up with the elderly who are very ill, if you could change your corner of the world, what would you do? What would you say? What would you do?
Yeah, so in the last chapter of my book, I talk about frailty risk scores. And I've given a lot of thought to how to advise my patients. Is it an age cutoff?
No.
It's not an age cutoff,
No,
right?
you say that in the book.
Yes. I have taken care of 97-year-olds who play tennis 3 times a week, and I have taken care of 50-year-olds who are wheelchair-bound and fully dependent for everything. So there's no such thing as an age cutoff. But the frailty risk scores that have been developed across medicine, across medical disciplines, are really helpful to help families get a sense of whether mom or grandma maybe should avoid a major medical intervention. And so the one that I describe in the book, I think, is kind of the easiest for the non-medical lay person to deal with. But it has things like, how much of the day is mom in bed? If she's in bed most of the day and just not getting out.
Sleeping and sleeping and sleeping.
Yeah, not a good sign.
Can't walk more than 1.5 miles an hour.
Yeah, walking super slowly across the floor. Is she losing weight, not even trying?
Yeah, for no reason.
Yes.
That is to say.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. No medical reason. She's just losing weight. Well, because she's in bed all day, not eating, right? Can she hold a coffee cup?
Yes.
She drops the coffee cup or can't really grip anything. Another bad sign. So there are these sorts of ways of assessing. And I started thinking about this very early on when I was a medical student. And I remember I was on my GI surgery rotation. And there was a 98-year-old going in for a hemicolectomy, which is removing half of her colon for colon cancer. A big surgery in a 98-year-old woman. And I thought, what are we doing? She's not going to bounce back from surgery well at all. And she already had some degree of cognitive impairment, but her family could not imagine her dying without treatment. And so they sent her through surgery. She came, I saw her post-operatively, but then, you switch services, and I don't know how long she lived after that. But I could imagine for a very elderly woman who had to be wheeled in a wheelchair, who already wasn't walking at baseline, who was very thin, very wasted, that probably she didn't live very long after that surgery. Is that the way to live out your last days of life?
Pastorally speaking, so I've been a pastor for some years. Mostly I'm a professor, but I'm a pastor. It's been fascinating to me to talk to people who've lived a good life, who have a happy marriage. Maybe there were some real challenges, but they worked it out. In fact, everybody has challenges. But one woman sticks out in my mind, especially 85 years old, razor-sharp mind, serious cancer all over her body. And I said, how's it going? And she said, I am ready to die. I said, you've been given 48 hours to live. You're probably going to live 24 to maybe 72 hours. She said, I'm fine. I've lived a good life.
Yeah.
I've loved my husband. I've loved my children. I have no loose ends. I'm ready to meet the Lord. And that's one of your main points, is that you're ready to die. And we're not accusing somebody who wants treatment for mom at the age of 98 of having bad relationships.
That's right.
But it's vastly easier to let go when you've done what you have to do in this life.
And the idea behind the Ars Moriendi, this art of dying genre of literature, is that you're sort of doing that work every day.
Right.
Because you don't know when the end is. I mean, we live as if we're going to all be so old or whatever, but we don't know. And I think COVID, interestingly, COVID was a little bit of a wake-up call, but at the end, and I did many book talks during COVID because the book was released during then, I would say that in my experience, it was really the boomers who engaged the content of my book. And anybody younger, even people who had severe forms of COVID and had post-COVID syndromes and post-COVID chest pain, did not really want to think about their mortality after COVID. They wanted to get on with living.
Right.
Whereas the boomers saw that COVID meant mortality for their generation. And so they, I received letters from all kinds of people. They were really, really amazing. You know, look, I'm not a believer in anything, but I read your book and I don't want to die without being reconciled to my children.
Yes.
So I've committed to getting together with my adult children twice a year. We're all meeting at such and such a location. We're going to invest in our relationships. I don't want to leave this world without that in place. And so things like that, I get letters like this and I thought, okay, well, this is it. But this is really the art of living then. And it's the art of attending to all of the things now that we want to be in place before the end of our lives.
Right, which would include reconciliation to a friend, perhaps, where there's a ruptured relationship,
Correct.
not just families.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to a different direction, and we have a variety of physicians and people in the medical field. So you lay out some challenges. You're a physician. You challenge your tribe and say we're trained to be rescuers, to be saviors, to be heroes that might get in the way of the best care. You tell a story about someone who's all ready to die, no more treatments, and then somebody says, well, there is one more thing. And we said we weren't going to do that. And that's the rescuer mentality that is coming in. What would you say to your beloved and wise and gifted and skilled medical professionals on this front?
I think doctors and nurses need to do their own work on anticipating their own mortality and doing their own preparation, because I think that is the biggest obstacle to really good end-of-life care. I think that's the biggest one.
That's a big statement. Did you mean to say that?
Yeah,
it's the biggest obstacle?
Yeah, in many ways, yes, because there are always going to be resource issues. Resource issues
Right.
never go away, right? So you could say, I can imagine a counter argument. Well, lack of palliative care in rural America or
Right.
sub-Saharan Africa.
But doctors have to face their own mortality, and doctors, you say, are a profession that generally likes to avoid thinking about death because we can cheat death, we can save people.
Yes, and there's a financial impetus to do
Yes.
another procedure.
Yes.
And it's the heroic thing. It's doing something, not doing nothing.
That's the savior mentality.
Correct. And my colleague Jeff Bishop, who's here at St. Louis University, he says medicine is about doing, not about thinking. And my sense is that that's right on the money. That why would you pause and reflect with a dying patient about
when you could do something
when you
for
can do
them.
open heart surgery and keep moving forward. I just want to say one other thing though two other things. One is I have had colleagues say to me, I don't know why you're interested in working on death or thinking about death. I remember one woman saying to me, I myself am so afraid to die that I
Yes.
do whatever I can not to talk to patients about death.
That's a physician who won't talk to her patients about death. You would think that
Correct.
would be something that comes with the job.
You would think. But this is the other thing I want to say, which is that hospice and palliative medicine, the work of relieving uncomfortable symptoms and accompanying people to the natural end of their lives used to be the work of all doctors.
Yes.
It is now a subspecialty.
Specialty, right.
And so since there is a specialty, why would your every doctor, so to speak, learn to do that work when it can be outsourced to a specialist?
Especially given how psychologically painful it is.
So, yeah, and you can't bill for it if you're a surgeon. That's not what you bill for.
Well, we were talking about this before we started, and my father got a pacemaker when he was almost completely gone mentally, against his repeated, explicit, written and verbal exhortations, do not perform any heroic measures. And, I've always wondered if it was more a matter of my mother's immense tenderness. He recognized me a little bit once a month, or whether there was somebody who had something to gain by encouraging her are you sure? Are you sure you don't want to do this? And of course, there's a procedure and there's financial reward.
Yeah,
I don't mean to be critical, but I couldn't help but ask.
It's always tricky. It's always tricky to know when is it more of one than the other. I'm sure someone would have read your mother as not wanting her beloved to die, and she derives great joy from sitting with him and accompanying him. I mean, look, I'm an ethicist in a hospital, and sometimes we do violate patients' legally stated wishes at the insistence of the wife of 58
says,
years.
You've got to do something to save my husband.
How can you let my husband die when I know you can
do something to extend his life another 4 days?
Correct. Yeah.
And we want to make it really clear. There's nothing wrong with a desire to extend life, but there's a time when the desire is actually causing nothing but misery and inflicting a lot of pain. Sometimes, again, this is a theme in your book, that you treat people and one woman wanted surgery. She was your patient in the book. And then afterward, she woke up and said, I wish I hadn't told you.
Oh, the woman I resuscitated. I think you're
in this way.
Yeah.
And because her life is so much harder now, she didn't realize that she got what she wanted, and once she got it, she realized she didn't actually desire that.
Yes, I think that's right. It's a really fine line to know when you're. So there's a bioethicist, Dan Callahan. He's kind of one of the grandfathers of bioethics, medical ethics. And I remember him telling me, he's gone now, but I remember him telling me he didn't think that ethically we should be required to do what we could do in a pre-technological era. That is, now I say that, and if you talk to a neonatologist, a newborn baby doctor, and they say, oh, no.
Yeah.
We are past the era of taking disabled babies and setting them aside, which is what happened in the U.S. even until not that long ago, 50, 60, 70 years ago. Right. Children born with disabilities would sort of be set in the back of the nursery and no one would attend to them.
Not nourished.
Yeah, and they would be allowed to die. So neonatologists are very nervous about that. But I think it's a helpful, again, not set in stone, but a helpful way of thinking about medical treatments for the extreme elderly in particular, or for people with really bad disease across the board. Should we really be required ethically, morally, to continue all of this stuff that wouldn't have been available 100 years ago? The Catholic Church, I think, does some of the best bioethics work around. And there's a distinction in the Catholic tradition between ordinary and extraordinary means.
Right.
And various clergy and councils and papal leaders have written that even while we would think nutrition and hydration are ordinary, that there could be certain clinical scenarios in which feeding tubes and fluids are extraordinary. And in fact, we know that's true because in some forms of cancer, giving nutrition just makes the cancer speed up.
Right.
And so, yes, it would be extraordinary in that circumstance. So taking care of people, washing them, sitting with them, holding their hands, spoon feeding as tolerated. All of that is the very, very rich human care, labor intensive, hard, labors of love. But I think that's the care that if we could package that up and sell it, that's the kind of care I want to see for end of life people.
Of course, it's not sold.
And most of it's provided unpaid.
Yeah.
And people have to take leaves of
I'll
absence
tell you, I'll let
work.
you comment on a story. A friend of mine, we were tennis buddies for 25 years. Last thing we did together was win a championship in a certain league to our immense pleasure. A month later, he started having severe pain in his back, went to a chiropractor, back spasms. He played hard. 3 ribs broke. And they thought, it's cancer, right? Which has started in his liver and spread. He called me up. He was also in my church. He was an elder in my church. I was his pastor. We had a relationship. He called me and a couple other people up hours after he got his diagnosis and said, Dan, will you come see me every week until I'm better or with the Lord? And he knew it was a big ask. And I said, yes, I will come every week. If I possibly can, I won't make it every single week. I just have to tell you that. And I would go and just sit with him, and we would tell stories and talk about whatever he wanted to talk about. His wife would say, hi, Dan, do you want a drink of water? I'm leaving. And I said, yes, by all means, go. I'm going to sit with him. And the rule of thumb for pastors is 20 minutes when somebody's really sick. And he absolutely would not let me leave. I mean, I was there for an hour every single time. And we would reminisce. Sometimes we would hold hands. And I thought it was I was so glad he asked me to do that. Come see me every week, because I would have come once a month or something. I was so glad to do that with him. That was the closest I ever got to something that you're talking about, I think.
Yeah. I mean, the care of people up until the end can be the hardest thing that some families go through. So to qualify for home hospice, which I think is a marvelous way to die.
He was under home hospice at the end, yep.
You need to commit to 24/7 care. And that's where it ends up being a lot if it's just a wife and one or two kids. And I have another colleague, very, very accomplished professional, prestigious university professor, et cetera. And he said, Lydia, we cared for my dad at home. It pretty much broke us. It was the hardest thing. Because you weren't doing this for your friend, but you're also washing and bathing and changing the diapers and running the IVs and all of that. You're doing all of that. And that's not what you signed up for in sort of holding hands and spoon feeding grandma, right? And so that's what a lot of families don't realize. Dying at home is a beautiful thing if it can happen, but it can be so hard. Yes. You add to that too. It's one thing if grandma for whom you're caring is very little lady, but
it's a large man.
If it's a large man, it's a different story.
And if he's 80 and his wife is 80 and she's trying to take care of him, I mean, she can injure herself.
For sure.
Yeah. I'm gonna just say your book made me think of Psalm 90. Teach us to number our days aright. Give us a heart of wisdom. Which then reminded me of Job 28:12, which marvels at technology. It's the technology of the time was mining. He's just blown away with mining, damming up the water, dangling by ropes, searching out the darkness with lights. And then he says, but where can wisdom be found? And it's one of those spots where there's no answer. Job does not say where you find wisdom in the right use of technology. So we're trying to do that together. You're trying to do that. In a sense, that's your life's work, I think. So let me ask you a couple quick rapid-fire questions, less than a minute if you can. If you can. If you can't, it's okay. What is it actually like to save someone's life?
I mean, this CPR you're talking about?
Yeah, well, whatever. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, that's the way that we typically save lives. There's so many different ways to save lives, but I think with CPR, you have a body that's still warm. And, this for me is in the hospital because I'm not resuscitating people out on the field. And the guy is young and you're pretty sure he just had a massive heart attack. And it's a team effort. So, there's somebody starts the process of trying to get a breathing tube in. Somebody's masking him until the breathing tube is inserted. You have somebody doing chest compressions. You have somebody starting a large IV in the groin. You have somebody with a cart handing medications that are to try to kickstart the heart. It's the all hands on deck experience and waiting for the pulse. And you keep running rounds. There's a kind of whole algorithm you follow, but you keep running rounds of this until you get the pulse back. And when somebody says, I got the pulse, and it's a young person, and you think, okay, this guy's got a shot of leaving the hospital alive. Because in contrast to what we see on television, most CPRs are failed.
Almost 90%.
Yeah, meaning that the person, we might get the heart rate back, but they don't leave the hospital alive.
Right.
So, but a young person, yes. I think of another way of saving a life, which is putting in that breathing tube. So someone comes in, whether it's horrible asthma or horrible pneumonia or horrible lung failing from some other kind of disease, and you can get that breathing tube in and suddenly their color comes back and they're on the brink of death but for the breathing tube. That's an extraordinary way of saving life. And then maybe another way is, with the breathing, and then what I'm about to talk about is severe sepsis, where the infection is just devastating the body. But you can run fluids in, you start your IV antibiotics, you've got breathing support, and you just like very quickly the body comes around. Again, it's the miracle of all of this. You know, people often ask me, do you see miracles in medicine? I believe in miracles. I don't see the kind of, I don't see the kind of, that are on TV. I don't see Lazarus in the grave for how many ever days coming out. But isn't it a miracle that we can transplant organs? And isn't it a miracle that we can save people who would die from diseases in an earlier generation in droves, and we could just save them with a dose or two of antibiotics?
Well, can't we say that probably half the people listening to this podcast would have died 400 years ago before they reached adulthood?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And we probably know a lot of people. We probably both know hundreds or thousands of people whose lives were saved when they were 3, 4, 6, 10, when they had a raging infection or something.
Correct.
Yeah, so we give thanks for that. Is there a book or a media event of any kind, TV, movie, documentary, is there anything that gives people a good look, or a book, on what the life of a doctor is in the hospital?
Well, I'm really bad at it. I don't watch TV.
Oh, okay. Do you read books? I offered you the book option. I do read books.
Yeah, you did offer me the book option.
Could even be a short story.
You know what? I don't like doctor books. I don't watch any of that doctor stuff.
Okay, we're back to books though.
But the book that I would recommend is The Death of Ivan Ilyich.
Oh yeah.
Which I commend because it is such a gorgeous demonstration of how complicated illness, dying, inter-family relationships, inter-community relationships, the lure of striving and achievement and losing that. Right. Who is with you to the end? It ends up being his servant, who's really the only one who understands him in the very end. And then these questions of the divine, right? And what happens ultimately when we die. Anyway, it's a gorgeous book. That I would recommend. In terms of like the life of a doctor, I don't know. Can't help you there.
No, that's good. That's fine. Just one.
Can't help you there.
You're trying to change your corner of the world. If you could sit down with everybody who's facing challenging decisions of this kind, could you craft a statement or two about why you say what you say? What are the principles that are driving this? And if you could epitomize it in one takeaway sentence, like, listen, there's one thing you need to hear.
I mean, I think the Psalm 90 verse is exactly right, that we grow wiser in reflecting on our mortality. If we live with an idea that the end will come, then we live very differently. So you told me before we started this that when you were 26 or something, you read a bunch of books on the art of dying, and they didn't make sense to a 26-year-old. What I say when I'm talking to college kids...
By which I don't mean I couldn't understand the sentences. I couldn't understand why so many people are writing books about the art of dying. Go ahead.
I'm confident you understood the sentences. What I say to college kids when I speak on campuses is that, you know, as a college kid, very rarely do you have that incredible meal that is so divine. You could never cook it yourself. You could never afford it. Right. But let's just say your rich roommate's family comes to town and they take you to the nicest restaurant in St. Louis.
And the chef is
Michelin rated, blah, 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 whatever. If you eat that way every day, you don't appreciate it. But when you eat that way once in 4 years or 12 years or 20 years, you savor it and you appreciate everything about the experience. And I think living with that kind of intentionality helps us not waste the days that we are given. And it's not just about maximizing, right? That's not what I'm saying. It's about flourishing, ultimately, living into the fullness of the life that we've been given and doing that in community, in relationship with the divine. All of that together, I think, leads to the best life possible. What principles guide me? I was just taking care of so many patients who've died terribly. So it's really a desire to help people understand what it's like in the hospital, understand what medicine can do. A year or two ago, I was speaking to a room full of middle-aged New Yorkers, my people, my demographic, and I was speaking about the art of dying, and I was shocked that they had no idea how mechanical ventilators really do what they do, what they really do. They didn't know about dialysis to replace kidney function. They weren't really sure about heart pumps or ECMO
They thought it's kind of like getting a bone set, pretty simple stuff.
They just didn't know. They
didn't know it's
idea.
brutally difficult.
They had been healthy. They came to my talk because they have aging parents,
right.
But they've just not been exposed. If you're not in healthcare or healthcare adjacent and haven't bothered to learn these things yourself, why would you know? And that for me was a wake-up call, that it's not that people are ignorant. It's just that they have no exposure to this stuff until they're in some advanced state of illness, and then everything comes cascading down and they're on the conveyor belt, and this happens and that happens and that happens. And then they end up in this terrible state of dying a death they would have never wanted. And again, it's not just about wish fulfillment. I think that's part of it, but it's also about making peace with God and neighbor. That probably matters much more than whether you have a medical procedure you wish you didn't have. Have you made your peace with God and neighbor? I write in the book about a woman I was called to see in the hospital who was, the nurses told me she's being difficult, the sort of euphemism, the difficult patient. And it turns out she was in an existential crisis. She was an older single woman, and she knew she was dying, and she was getting very close to the end. A lot of times patients know when they're dying. They give us little clues if we listen, if we slow down enough. And she knew she was dying, and she was just in existential dread because she had willfully ignored the religious questions for most of her life. And now she wanted someone to help her quickly make sense of it so she knew what she believed. And I was sitting there watching her deteriorate right in front of me. There's no quick pill you can give to alleviate existential dread. I mean, could knock her out, but that's not the kind of pill that somebody needs. And so I thought, well, look, if this work on the art of dying can help patients avoid these highly medicalized deaths, avoid the conveyor belt when it's prudent, make peace with their neighbor, their families, reconcile, understand a little bit better about how we have died forever and the rituals that have helped us guide that. And
don't buy the transhumanism dream.
Yeah, that's right. That this feels like a project worth pursuing.
Yeah. So, my friends, we have spent some time with Dr. Lydia Dugdale. I can't recommend her book highly enough, The Art of Dying. And I know that the vast majority of you who listen to this podcast are believers, and you trust that upon death, by faith, you will enter the Lord's presence. But not all of you. And so we're happy to have all of our listeners, and we want all of our listeners to think about the ultimate questions and understand who Jesus is and what he's done, and be reconciled to their family so we can die well and enter eternity with joy. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for your time.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Working with Dan Doriani is a production of the Center for Faith and Work St. Louis. We seek to promote faithfulness in the workplace, in education, in discipleship, and in the stories of believers who've applied their faith at work. If you want to put your faith to work and change your corner of the world, visit our website, the Center for Faith and Work St. Louis. Look for faithandworkstl.org. That's one word. We'll help you start a cohort with like-minded believers who also want to practice their faith at work. This podcast is donor-supported. To keep us going, please donate on our website. Maybe more importantly, you can support us by listening, by subscribing, by sharing, by liking us, by posting us on your favorite platform, or go old school and tell a friend.